Why did he die and I lived? I carried on. I fought in Kashmir. I also recruited for the Philippines, Bosnia, and Chechnya. And the questions grew. Later in Burma, I came across Rohingya fighters who were barely teenagers, born and brought up in the jungle, carrying machine guns and grenade launchers. I met two 13-year-olds with soft manners and gentle voice. Looking at me, they begged me to take them away to England. They simply wanted to go to school. That was their dream. My family, my children of the same age, were living at home in the UK, going to school, living a safe life. And I couldn't help wonder how much these young boys must have spoken to one another about their dreams for such a life. Victims of circumstances. These two young boys, sleeping rough on the ground, looking up at the stars, cynically exploited by their leaders for their personal lust for glory and power. I soon witnessed boys like them killing one another in conflicts between rival groups. And it was the same everywhere. Afghanistan, Kashmir, Burma, Philippines, Chechnya. Petty warlords got the young and vulnerable to kill one another in the name of jihad. Muslims against Muslims, not protecting anyone against invaders or occupiers, not bringing relief to the oppressed. Children being used, cynically exploited, people dying in conflicts which I was supporting in the name of jihad. And it still carries on today. Realizing that the violent jihad I had engaged in abroad was so different, such a chasm between what I had experienced and what I thought was sacred duty. I had to reflect on my activities here in the UK. I had to consider my preaching, recruiting, fundraising, training, but most importantly, radicalizing, sending young people to fight and die as I was doing, all totally wrong. So I got involved in violent jihad in the mid-80s, starting with Afghanistan. And by the time I finished, it was in the year 2000. I was completely immersed in it. All around me, people supported, applauded, even celebrated what we were doing in their name. But by the time I learned to get out, completely disillusioned in the year 2000, 15 years had passed. So what goes wrong? We were so busy talking about virtue, and we were blinded by a cause. And we did not give ourselves a chance to develop a virtuous character. We told ourselves we were fighting for the oppressed, but these were unwinnable wars. We became the very instrument through which more deaths occurred, complicit in causing further misery to the selfish benefit of the cruel few. So over time, a very long time, I opened my eyes. I began to dare to face the truth, to think, to face the hard questions. I got in touch with my soul. What have I learned? That people who engage in violent jihadism that people who are drawn to these types of extremisms are not that different to everyone else. But I believe such people can change. They can regain their hearts and restore them by filling them with human values that heal. When we ignore the realities, we discover that we accept what we are told without critical reflection. And we ignore the gifts and advantages that many of us would cherish even for a single moment in their lives. I engaged in actions I thought were correct. But now I began to question how I knew what I knew. I endlessly told others to accept the truth, but I failed to give doubt its rightful place. This conviction that people can change is rooted in my experience, my own journey. Through wide reading, reflecting, contemplation, self-knowledge, I realized that the Islamist world of us and them is false and unjust. Through considering the uncertainties in all that we had asserted to be inviolable truths, incontestable truths, I developed a more nuanced understanding. I realized that in a world crowded with variation and contradiction, foolish preachers, only foolish preachers, like I used to be, see no paradox in the myths and fictions they use to assert authenticity. So I understood the vital importance of self-knowledge, political awareness, and the necessity for a deep and wide understanding of our commitments and our actions, how they affect others. So my plea today to everyone, especially those who sincerely believe in Islamist jihadism, refuse dogmatic authority. Let go of anger, hatred, and violence. Learn to right wrongs without even attempting to justify cruel, unjust, and futile behavior. Instead, create a few beautiful and useful things that outlive us. Approach the world, life, with love. Learn to develop or cultivate your hearts to see goodness, beauty, and truth in others and in the world. That way we do matter more to ourselves, to each other, to our communities, and for me, to God. This is jihad, my true jihad. Thank you.